In the scorched deserts of southern Mesopotamia, great earthen mounds rise from the horizon like ancient guardians. These tells, built from thousands of years of human habitation, hold the secrets of civilization's birth. Among them stands Ur, once mentioned in the Bible as Abraham's birthplace, now a testament to humanity's first urban revolution. For over a millennium before 2400 BCE, the Sumerians had created something unprecedented. True cities. Towering ziggurats pierced the sky like ancient skyscrapers, while sophisticated irrigation systems turned barren land into fertile gardens. In cities like Uruk, Ur, and Lagash, tens of thousands lived behind massive walls, worshipping gods, trading goods, and developing the world's first writing system. But this glittering civilization had a dark side. Sumerian society was brutally hierarchical. A hereditary priesthood and nobility controlled vast temple estates, while common people struggled under crushing debt, often selling their children into slavery. The cities fought endless wars, particularly Lagash and Umma, battling over farmland and water rights for centuries. Archaeological evidence reveals the stark inequality. Elite families lived in vast compounds with multiple courtyards, while most people crowded into tiny, cramped houses. Temple estates controlled much of the agricultural land, and priests claimed divine appointment to justify their power. Border stones marked contested territories where armies clashed repeatedly over the same strategic points. By 2400 BCE, this world was reaching a breaking point. Social tensions were explosive, and the old order struggled to maintain stability. Then came Lugal-Zarghesi of Umma, who conquered his rivals and claimed to rule from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. He created the first multi-city empire, brutally suppressing enemies and destroying their temples in acts of unprecedented sacrilege. But Lugal-Zarghesi's triumph would be short-lived. For in the north, in the mysterious land called Akkad, a new type of ruler was rising, one who would change the world forever. His birth name is lost to history, but the world would know him as Sargon, legitimate king, the first great empire builder. Legend says he was born to a priestess who, unable to care for him, placed him in a reed basket and sent him down the river. Found by a water drawer named Akkad, the child was raised in humble circumstances, echoing stories that would later inspire the tale of Moses. Sargon's early career led him to become cupbearer to Ur-Zababa, king of Kish. But Sargon was different. He was Akkadian, speaking a Semitic language, part of a people who had lived alongside the Sumerians, yet remained distinct. This outsider perspective may have given him crucial insights into the weaknesses of the city-state system. When Lugal-Zarghesi conquered Kish, Sargon saw his opportunity. Around 2334 BCE, with a band of loyal followers, he marched directly on Uruk in a lightning strike at the heart of Sumerian power. In a single decisive battle, Sargon defeated the great army and captured Lugal-Zarghesi himself. The symbolic impact was enormous. Sargon led his captive rival in neck stocks to Nippur, the religious center of Mesopotamia, presenting him at the gate of Enlil, chief god of the Sumerian pantheon. This wasn't just military victory, it was divine legitimacy. The old king's power was broken. Sargon was favored by the gods. City after city fell to his relentless advance. Ur with its ancient ziggurat, Lagash with its proud military tradition, Umma with its fertile fields. Each victory brought territory, wealth, and population that would form the foundation of something entirely new. From near the confluence of the great rivers, Sargon founded Agade, a city that would echo through history though it has never been found. From this base, defended by the world's first professional army, he forged humanity's first true empire, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, and uniting dozens of peoples under one rule for the first time in human history. Sargon's conquest wasn't just military, it was the most radical social revolution the ancient world had ever witnessed. For over 1,000 years, Sumerian civilization had been built on seemingly permanent foundations. Hereditary priesthoods claiming divine appointment, noble families whose bloodlines stretched back to mythical city founders, and temple estates controlling vast agricultural lands. Sargon smashed this entire system with ruthless efficiency. Rather than working within existing structures, he implemented a complete political purge. Hereditary priests and nobles who had ruled for countless generations suddenly found themselves stripped of power, their ancient privileges revoked by the new imperial government. In their place, Sargon installed hand-picked Akkadian governors, whose loyalty was owed entirely to him personally. These new administrators were often outsiders, with no ties to Sumerian religious hierarchies. They governed by imperial decree rather than ancient custom, implementing policies designed to strengthen central authority. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. Temple estates that had supported the old elite for millennia were confiscated and redistributed to new Akkadian administrators. This created an entirely new social class whose wealth depended on maintaining loyalty to the crown. They could be removed at will, unlike the hereditary elite they replaced. To cement religious control, Sargon appointed his daughter Enheduanna as high priestess at Ur. She became the world's first known author, composing hymns that blended traditional Sumerian themes with propaganda supporting her father's dynasty. Through her writings, copied throughout the empire, Sargon connected his revolutionary government to divine approval. Administratively, Sargon declared Akkadian the empire's official language, creating bureaucratic unity across regions previously divided by linguistic differences. He built the world's first professional standing army, full-time warriors loyal to their commander rather than any city. Sargon also pioneered political propaganda, boasting of exact battle casualties and claiming divine sanction. He created a cult of personality based on fear and awe that would influence rulers for millennia. The age of city-states was over. The age of empires had begun. From his capital of Agade, Sargon transformed the ancient world's economy, creating the first truly global commercial network. Under Akkadian control, international trade reached unprecedented levels of sophistication and geographic scope that wouldn't be seen again for over 1,000 years. Agade's harbors bustled with ships from the most distant corners of the known world. Vessels from Dilmun, modern Bahrain, brought pearls and exotic spices. Ships from Magan in today's Oman carried diorite and copper. The harbor complex, with its stone quays and massive warehouses, became a cosmopolitan meeting point where merchants speaking dozens of languages negotiated deals spanning continents. Overland caravans were equally impressive. From Anatolia came silver and timber. From the Zagros Mountains arrived precious lapis lazuli from Afghanistan's distant mines. From Arabia came frankincense and myrrh, Lebanese cedar, Iranian chlorite vessels, and goods from across the known world flowed through Akkadian trade networks. The Akkadians achieved what no previous state had managed: direct control over entire trade networks rather than serving as middlemen. Archaeological evidence proves their remarkable reach. At Konar Sandal in eastern Iran, Akkadian seals show that traders traveled over 1,000 miles to barter with Iranian craftsmen, working alongside merchants from the Indus Valley civilization. For the first time, a single government controlled essential raw materials across vast distances. Tin, crucial for bronze production, flowed from Afghanistan through Akkadian networks. Grain from Sumer fed populations throughout the empire. Standardized weights and measures ensured fair dealing, while imperial protection encouraged long-distance investment. Akkad became fabulously wealthy from taxes flowing through these networks. Contemporary texts describe constantly crowded harbors and markets offering goods from every corner of the known world. This wasn't just commerce, it was cultural exchange on a massive scale. Ideas, technologies, and artistic styles spread rapidly along trade routes, creating the world's first truly cosmopolitan culture. The wealth generated funded military campaigns, monumental architecture, and artistic achievements that made Akkad legendary. More importantly, it established patterns of international commerce that would influence human civilization for millennia. When Sargon died in 2279 BCE after ruling for 56 years, his empire immediately faced its gravest crisis. The succession was controversial. Eldest son Manishtusu was passed over for younger brother Rimush, creating dangerous divisions within the royal family and suggesting the crown went to whoever was deemed most capable of maintaining control through ruthlessness. Almost immediately, major Sumerian cities rose in coordinated rebellion, seeing the succession crisis as their chance to throw off Akkadian rule. Lagash, Adab, and Umma declared independence, forming military alliances to resist imperial control. Rimush's response was systematic state terrorism designed to break future resistance through sheer fear. His forces killed over 8,000 enemy soldiers at Umma alone, while capturing another 5,400 for slave markets. But vengeance extended beyond battlefields. Rimush seized 134,000 hectares of agricultural land from defeated cities, one of history's largest forced land transfers, redistributing it to loyal Akkadian administrators. The psychological impact was devastating. Families who had owned the same fields for generations suddenly found themselves dispossessed, replaced by foreign overlords dependent on imperial favor. Rimush established labor camps where prisoners worked to death on construction projects, while mass deportations scattered resistance leaders across the empire. Archaeological evidence confirms the systematic destruction. At sites throughout former Sumer, destruction layers show deliberate demolition rather than random war damage. City walls were methodically torn down, temples desecrated, residential areas abandoned as populations fled or were relocated. Despite this reign of terror, revolts continued. After 9 years, conspirators strangled Rimush with cylinder seals. Instruments of imperial administration turned into weapons of revenge. Elder brother Manishtusu immediately seized power, suggesting the assassination was orchestrated by those who had never accepted the controversial succession. Manishtusu's reign marked a dramatic policy shift. He focused on diplomacy and commerce rather than constant warfare, opening trade relationships reaching Egypt and the eastern Mediterranean. His black diorite obelisk records land grants and celebrates peaceful achievements rather than military conquests. Yet even this moderate approach couldn't ensure survival. After 15 years, Manishtusu II fell to assassins, setting the stage for the most famous and controversial Akkadian ruler, his son Naram-Sin. In 2254 BCE, Naram-Sin inherited an empire in chaos. 9 major cities, led by Kish and Uruk, simultaneously declared independence. A massive uprising, suggesting years of secret planning, united by hatred of imperial control. Cities including Lagash, Umma, Adab, Isin, and even sacred Nippur joined the uprising, while territories in Elam and the west also rebelled. But Naram-Sin proved a military genius whose tactical brilliance exceeded even his grandfather's. Rather than fighting all enemies simultaneously, he systematically isolated and destroyed each coalition through carefully planned campaigns. It took 9 major battles over several years, but ultimately every rebel stronghold was reduced. At Kish and Uruk, ancient fortifications fell and waters rose to reshape the landscape. The violence reshaped not just cities, but the very foundations of civilization that had accumulated over 2 millennia. With the empire secured, Naram-Sin expanded Akkadian power to its greatest extent, from central Iran to the Mediterranean, possibly reaching Cyprus. His famous victory stele shows him trampling mountain peoples, commemorating conquest of the Lullaby, who had raided Mesopotamia for generations. Most revolutionary was Naram-Sin's religious claim. He declared himself not just divinely favored, but an actual god deserving worship. Royal inscriptions proclaim him the mighty god of Akkad, while temples were built for his worship throughout the empire. To reinforce these claims, Naram-Sin placed daughters as high priestesses in major temples, merging imperial authority with religious devotion. His greatest project was renovating the sacred Akkad temple at Nippur, employing hundreds of specialized craftsmen from across the empire to create one of antiquity's most magnificent religious complexes. Yet this very achievement, this hubris of claiming equality with gods, would be remembered as the fatal pride that brought divine punishment and ultimate destruction. Around 2200 BCE, as Naram-Sin's successor, Shakali-Shari, struggled to hold the fragmenting empire together, nature itself turned against Akkad. Scientific evidence reveals an unprecedented environmental catastrophe that fundamentally altered the climate-sustaining Mesopotamian civilization for over a millennium. This wasn't an ordinary drought. Paleoclimatic data indicates the catastrophe lasted for decades, possibly over a century, creating conditions more severe than anything experienced before or since. The crisis began in northern territories around Agade, precisely the marginal environment that had supported the Akkadian heartland through careful water management and sophisticated irrigation. When rain stopped and rivers ran lower each year, the delicate balance sustaining dense urban populations collapsed entirely. Archaeological evidence shows systematic abandonment throughout northern Mesopotamia. Hundreds of towns and villages were deserted as inhabitants died of starvation or fled southward. Sophisticated irrigation networks fell into disrepair as communities lacked resources for maintenance. The drought's effects extended far beyond Mesopotamia, creating a global climate crisis. Egypt's Old Kingdom collapsed simultaneously, with texts describing years when the Nile failed to flood. The Indus Valley civilization also experienced severe disruption, with major cities abandoned or significantly reduced. In the Akkadian heartland, environmental catastrophe destroyed the economic foundations of imperial power. Northern grain-producing regions became dusty wastelands, where even subsistence agriculture was impossible. Rivers that had powered mills dwindled to seasonal streams, while complex canal systems became sand-filled channels. Social consequences were devastating. Urban populations accustomed to regular food supplies faced chronic shortages, leading to malnutrition, disease, and unrest. Administrative systems became overwhelmed by simultaneous disasters across multiple regions. Trade networks connecting Akkad to distant civilizations broke down as merchants found fewer viable stopping points along traditional routes. Most critically, the environmental crisis created massive population movements, destabilizing the entire ancient Near East. The Gutians, mountain peoples from the Zagros range, were themselves forced to migrate by drought conditions, destroying their highland territories. These weren't opportunistic raiders, but climate refugees driven from ancestral lands by environmental conditions, making traditional lifestyles impossible. The drought that ended Akkad represents one of history's first well-documented examples of environmental change toppling sophisticated civilizations. The Akkadians had created unprecedented wealth and advanced technologies, yet proved helpless against climatic forces beyond their control. The same interconnectedness that made the empire powerful, extensive trade networks, specialized economies, dense urban populations, became vulnerabilities when environmental conditions changed rapidly. By 2200 BCE, the mighty Akkadian Empire was rapidly disintegrating under mounting pressures. Shakali-Shari found himself fighting desperately against Gutian warriors from the Zagros Mountains, Amorite tribes from western deserts, and renewed rebellions throughout southern territories. The great empire was reduced to a rump state centered around increasingly isolated Agade. The Gutians, often dismissed as barbarian raiders, were actually a complex confederation whose homelands had been devastated by the same climate catastrophe, destroying Akkadian agriculture. Archaeological evidence from the Zagros shows settlement abandonment and environmental degradation, suggesting Gutian migrations were driven by necessity rather than opportunism. These mountain peoples possessed crucial advantages. Their decentralized tribal structure proved more resilient during chaos than rigid imperial bureaucracy. Gutian warbands could move quickly across difficult terrain, strike vulnerable targets, and disappear into mountainous regions where heavy Akkadian infantry became liabilities. More significantly, they had adapted to survival in harsh environments through generations of pastoral nomadism, skills that became vital when drought made traditional farming impossible. Shakali Shari's 25-year reign was characterized by almost constant warfare against these mounting pressures. Royal inscriptions paint a picture of desperate fighting to maintain unity while dealing with internal rebellions, external invasions, and progressive breakdown of administrative systems. Southern rebellions proved particularly damaging, cutting Agade off from agricultural surpluses. Ancient Sumerian cities declared independence and formed defensive alliances reminiscent of the old city-state system. After Shakali Shari's death around 2192 BCE, the empire entered terminal decline. Several short-lived kings claimed authority in Agade, but their relationship to Sargon's dynasty remains unclear. These rulers left few inscriptions and controlled little beyond the capital's immediate vicinity. The great imperial administration that had once managed territories from Iran to the Mediterranean had collapsed. The final ruler, Shu-Durul, faced ultimate catastrophe when Gutian forces breached Agade's defenses. According to later texts, mountain warriors stormed through the gates, set fire to magnificent palaces and temples, and killed the last king in the flames of his burning capital. Archaeological evidence remains elusive because Agade's location has never been definitively identified despite over a century of searching. The fall marked not just a dynasty's end, but humanity's first experiment with large-scale imperial government seeming to fail catastrophically. Yet even as the physical city burned, its destruction was being transformed into legend. Sumerian poets created the Curse of Agade, blaming the fall on Naram-Sin's hubris in declaring himself divine. This fictional account preserved memory of Akkadian achievements while warning against excessive pride. Though Agade lay in ruins and Gutian chieftains ruled from its ashes, the Akkadian legacy proved immortal. When the Sumerian Third Dynasty of Ur expelled the Gutians around 2100 BCE, they didn't reject Akkadian innovations. They adopted them wholesale, creating their own empire modeled on Sargon's achievements, and proving these innovations had solved fundamental problems of large-scale governance. For the next 2 millennia, every major Mesopotamian ruler claimed to be Akkad's legitimate successor. The kings of Ur called themselves King of Sumer and Akkad. Hammurabi of Babylon used the title King of Akkad and commissioned copies of Sargon's inscriptions. Assyrian emperors styled themselves as New Sargons, claiming their conquests restored the original empire's rightful boundaries. Even Nebuchadnezzar II conducted archaeological excavations at Akkadian sites, seeking physical connections to the legendary past. His scholars studied Akkadian inscriptions and incorporated their language into contemporary propaganda, demonstrating that memory of Sargon's achievements remained politically powerful 15 centuries after the empire's collapse. The Akkadian language became the ancient world's diplomatic lingua franca, used in international correspondence from Egypt to Iran for over 1,500 years. Tablets in Akkadian have been found in pharaohs' archives, Hittite palaces, and Persian administrative centers, proving Sargon's decision to make his native tongue the imperial language had consequences extending far beyond his empire's boundaries. Administrative and military innovations became the standard template for effective governance. Professional armies loyal to central authority, governors appointed by merit rather than heredity, official languages creating bureaucratic unity, and propaganda techniques combining religious and political authority. All became fundamental features of subsequent empires. Beyond Mesopotamia, Akkadian influence spread through cultural transmission. The biblical Moses' birth story clearly echoes Sargon's legend, while universal kingship, governing diverse peoples under one crown, became a fundamental political concept, shaping civilizations from Rome to China. Most profoundly, Akkad demonstrated that political organization could transcend tribal identity and local geography. Sargon proved that vast populations speaking different languages and practicing different religions could be effectively united under competent central government, providing security and prosperity better than smaller-scale arrangements. This revolutionary insight that human societies could organize on a universal scale remains one of history's most important political discoveries. Modern international law, global economic integration, and multinational cooperation all trace intellectual ancestry to innovations pioneered in ancient Agade. Today, facing global challenges requiring unprecedented cooperation, climate change, pandemics, economic inequality, the Akkadian experiment remains remarkably relevant. 4,000 years ago, Sargon first demonstrated humanity could think beyond local limitations to imagine truly universal governance. In that sense, we are all inheritors of his revolution, building on foundations first laid in Mesopotamia's mud brick cities whenever nations cooperate across boundaries for common purposes.